Could I ask Stephen, and Irina to come back up here, please, and join us on the platform? And we're going to, it's your opportunity now to ask some questions. So if we can have some roving mics, that would be good. We've got some roving mics, that's excellent. So do we have any questions for our panel? Lady in black, just here, please. Lindsay's on her way. If you can remember your name and organisation and a quick question, please.
Okay, it's Kay Hedges from Remit Training. I'd like to ask about Prevent. We're a national provider, training provider. We're based, our head office is in Nottingham, so we have very close contact with the East Midlands person, your equivalent. What I find very difficult to put into our risk assessment and action plan is establishing what the levels of risk are across the country. Yes. Have you got any advice on how I can get hold of that? Because our contact is struggling to find that for us.
Okay, I've actually spoken to Sam recently, and I held an event for the West Midlands region. I think there's a couple of people here. I'm not sure whether they are here or not, but we held an event for that very reason, that people very really find out what that national threat is. I will speak to Sam again with the possibility. I actually had somebody who came up from London and presented that national threat level. And if you feel that there is a need, I'm more than happy to speak to Sam and see if we can actually do something jointly, because there was more of a need again in the West Midlands. People wanted to hear that again. You can get that information, but obviously a lot of it is very, very sensitive. So they come out, they'll do the presentation, but they won't leave you with any of that information for obvious reasons. It is quite scary, if I'm quite honest with you. But I'll speak to you at the end about how we can get that information to the East Midlands as well. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm keeping you fit, Lindsay.
I need it, don't I? My exercise.
Gentleman here, please.
Hi, Kashif Taj from IBM, and apologies, it's another Prevent question for Hifsa. We've now achieved employer provider status. So we're very keen to become Prevent duty compliant. Got a couple of concerns around thinking about risk assessments and risk assessing our learners and how that is compatible with IBM overall global policy. So what advice could you give on that, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
What I'm going to direct you to, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but the Education and Training Foundation website have actually got a lot of information on there, and they also have model risk assessments and action plans for you to use. And again, advice to anybody, if you're unsure about what to put in there, feel free to use those, but definitely link in with your coordinators, because what we can then do is talk to you about whether something is relevant or there is something else that you need to add, depending on the number of apprentices that you have as well. But it's definitely a good website to have a look at.
Okay, thank you. Are there any non-Prevent questions? Any questions for Stephen and Irina, or Stephen from SEMTA?
Oh, I've got a question here, which is
back over there,
essentially
right.
for Stephen, but I'm Sarah Pears. Hello, Stephen, from the Women's Engineering Society. Stephen, earlier today, various different speakers talked about things like flexibility and part-time apprenticeships, etc. I'm just wondering if SEMTA has a view on that. I think in terms of inclusion, particularly for people in intersections, as in gender and disabilities, LGBT plus disabilities, etc. That sort of ability to have flexible part-time apprenticeships would be great.
Yeah, hi Sarah. I can't really comment on what people said earlier because I made it here about 5 minutes before I actually came on stage, but broadly speaking, the short answer is yes. I mean, we know that flexible working patterns work in terms of attracting more women to get into engineering and keep more women in engineering, particularly when they reach childbearing age, when it comes to doing a job of work. So I see no reason why that wouldn't work for apprenticeships as well. And I don't know if there's anything that specifically prevents you actually from having an apprenticeship that's part-time rather than full-time, but it's certainly something that I've heard a number of engineering companies that I've spoken to when I've been traveling around express an interest in doing. And it's something as well that I've raised and continue to raise when I speak about apprenticeships, and particularly apprenticeship diversity issues, when I speak to civil servants and people at departments as well. So I'll just keep on with it for you.
Any thoughts from a prison aspect about full-time, part-time working when prisoners are released? Anything you can say to us about that?
I think the biggest factor is salary.
I'm not sure you're on. Are we on?
1, 2.
I think one of the biggest impacts is salary, what they're going to be paid when they come out. Some of them may have commitments when they're out, and that's timing will be important there. If they're restricted in terms of when they get back at night, if prisoners are released with a tag, they have to be back by a certain time, and that can really impact. If they don't get back on time, they immediately return to prison if they break their rules. So it would help. It would certainly help.
And the other thing is very many prisoners have reporting restrictions on them. So they might have to attend a police station once a day at a certain time, etc. So employers have got to be flexible, or apprenticeships have got to be flexible to allow that sort of reasonable adjustment to be made as well.
Good, thank you. Okay, thank you. Gentleman at the back there. Well done, Lindsay. Great job.
Yeah. My name's Del Gibson from Platform 38. We started a programme 6 months ago in the prison service, especially, in being able to give voluntary service, working alongside a garden project and getting the day release through the prison governors. For some reason or another, that fell through and actually being completed. Is there any way that you can actually help to support us in being able to restart that programme?
Steve and Irene, it's got to be a question for you guys.
Sorry,
I'll let you decide which one of you can.
It depends very much where it was, in which area.
London?
But certainly going forward, the funding rules have changed for how prison education is funded. So previously, certainly for providers, they were funded on qualifications and outcomes. So it was much more difficult to engage with voluntary agencies or with providers because there was no direct income related to that. I think it's become much more flexible, and there may now be opportunities to do that. It just depends in which region you're at, and then to contact either the prison direct or the training provider who's already working in those prisons. But governors have been given autonomy, been empowered to actually select some of the programs they feel are most appropriate for their population at this time.
Yeah,
and that's going to increase.
We've done that route of the funding. It's the support that we need to find out how we can actually take the next level of actually completing the course that we had the man on doing a business plan to achieve a catering qualification, because you have the hospitality and corporate experience that we wanted to develop, from giving them a second chance from the prison reform system back into employment in something that was going to be individually incorporated back into his lifestyle. Is that clear enough?
Yeah, I think what we can say is we would love to talk to you straight after this. We'll be back at the back there. I think we're going to have a coffee break in a moment.
We will.
So we'll personally talk to you. We'll try and get
That's
something
brilliant.
sorted.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's not unusual. We find within prisons, prisoners move, courses drop out, courses come on again. Unfortunately, these interruptions, we get used to living in a regime of interruptions constantly. You know, it's what we say, we don't know if someone's going to be there tomorrow. I had a new class start just this Tuesday. I don't know when I go back tomorrow if they're going to be there still. You know, out of the 7 or 8 that I've enrolled, there might only be 4 or 5 tomorrow. I hope there's going to be 7 or 8, otherwise my boss that's sitting next to me will give me some hassle, but in the best possible way. But we never know from day to day as prison educators.
Okay.
That's the challenge. That's part of the fun of the work.
Thank you, Stephen. That's good. Any further questions? I've actually got a question for Hifsa that I'm asked quite a lot. And I'm asked it not so much as a question, but as a comment. If I'm a teacher in a school, and one of the aspects of Prevent is sort of thinking and noticing about behavioural change in a person that might indicate in some way, shape or form they're being radicalised or what have you. If I'm a teacher in a school where I see my pupils every day, over a period of time, it might well be possible that I will notice that behavioural change. One of the things that I think concerns FE providers, whether they're private providers or colleges, but particularly those delivering apprenticeships, is that during the course of a 12-month, 18-month apprenticeship, I might actually only see that person, well, conceivably 3 or 4 times. And yet I still have an obligation to think about behavioural change during that. And clearly that's a much more difficult thing to do than if I'm a teacher seeing my pupils every day. Do you have any thoughts or comments about that? Because that is a genuine concern that I know a lot of apprenticeship providers have around that obligation.
There are 2 aspects to it. The first thing is that when we do the training, one of the things that we certainly don't say is that you need to be picking up behaviours that might indicate somebody is being radicalised. Because the behavioural changes that may be taking place could be down to all sorts of reasons. Grooming, child sexual exploitation, they may be involved in gangs, there may be something around domestic abuse, sexual abuse. Changes in behaviours change because of all sorts of reasons. What we say is that one of the aspects might be that they're being radicalised, but we are not asking you to look for signs specific to radicalisation because there aren't any. The behavioural changes that take place could be because of all sorts of reasons. The other thing is that it's not one person's job to pick up these signs. If we look at a case, for example, Andrew Ibrahim, who was in further education, there were so many different aspects of behaviours that he was displaying, things that were being picked up by his tutors, by his parents, by health service, by people in mosques. Nobody did anything. So it's not about saying, well, you may only see this person, 2 or 3 times over a 12-month period. There will be other people who will maybe picking up signs of behavioural changes as well, which is why it's so important that when we talk about Prevent, it's everybody's job, and it's about ensuring absolutely that information, there is a system whereby people can refer any concerns into a central body, which is what was missing for people like Andrew Ibrahim.
Thank you. That's a really, really helpful response. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes.
Stephen, I was very impressed with your presentation and what SIMTA is doing to address diversity. The reason why I was very impressed is how holistic approach.
I'm sorry, sir. Can we have a question?
Yeah.
It comes back. It comes back. What's your question?
So, it comes back to the.
Keep talking. You can talk.
It comes back to the positive action side of it you mentioned. How does it implement in terms of diversity within your company using positive action where there's underrepresentation in certain parts within your company workforce?
Okay, that's wonderful. So,
how do you implement positive action? One of the things that you're allowed to do under the law, and which I know that some companies in our sector are doing already, is if you've got 2 candidates who are equally balanced in terms of their abilities, and there's no way of choosing between them, but one of them comes from an underrepresented group within your particular sector, you are allowed under the law to use positive action to choose the individual from the underrepresented group and take that step to create a more diverse workforce if you think that person is going to add something to the team that you have already in place that you're currently lacking. So that's one thing that I know that employers are able to do, but there are a wide range of other factors as well. I won't go into too much detail about the Equality Act 2010, but it's all within the Equality Act 2010. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you after, during the coffee break as well, and kind of go into a bit more detail about some of the other things that I know companies are doing too, if that would be helpful.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you, Steve. And perhaps one final question before coffee break. That usually means nobody will put their hand up because you'll want your coffee break. But seriously, does anybody have anything else they would like to ask? Yes. Good. Thank you. Come on, Lindsay. Thank you. Your name and organisation, please.
My name's Noreen. I'm from Vortex Training. It's just in relation to Prevent. What about British values? Is there something on British values on the government webpage that we could sort of link into?
Yes, there is a lot of information around British values. Again, if you look at that same website, the Education Training Foundation, there's a whole section in there on British values as well.
Oh, there is.
And in fact, there is something coming out hopefully next week, and I'll be able to send that through to Lindsay as soon as that comes out too. But it's not available yet.
It's not, okay, because I have been researching, but I can't seem to find something specific to British values. That's why I asked.
I'll make sure you get that information through
Thank
Lindsay,
you.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you everyone for your questions. Can we say a big thank you to our...
Think apprenticeship. Think pathway.